Hi everyone, I hope you are good today. Today I'm giving myself a little challenge, which is to describe, with my now vast experience, as it were, an INFJ man of a certain age in 5 minutes. So the first minute is not the description of the INFJ man, which is why hopefully this video will be 6 minutes, 1 plus 5. So just before I move on to my description, remember that you can support me on Patreon at the link below. It helps me massively as in my future endeavors also, in order to be able to continue producing content for you. And don't forget that you also have access to these two books, The Ecstatic Soul, my book on the INFJ. Check out the links below, and my book, The Infinite Castle, which is a novel. Rumor has it the main character is an INFJ. Both available below. Check them out. Support me. It's always appreciated, but it's also massively helpful. Okay, thank you so much to my supporters. Now, let's move on to a description in 5 minutes of what Max Weber calls, the ideal type. Doesn't correspond to any specific INFJ man, but it's an ideal type. So the INFJ man is someone who is reflective. Not the quickest in reflection, that is to say, compared to extroverts, they tend to be more collected and they might not stand out in public. They might seem like they're more thoughtful. Some people might underestimate them, might think they have nothing to say, or maybe a little bit bland. Partly also because maybe unlike INFPs or ENFPs or ISFPs, or a lot of types that have introverted judgment a little bit higher in their stack, which gives an idiosyncratic approach to a sense of taste. Often INFJs, and you see like this INFJ here, they're dressed, well, but they don't like to stand out too much. They have a somewhat either traditional, formal, or not too obtrusive style of dress. They don't like to stand out too much. It's part of it as well. Now, what ought to be understood though is that if you were to get to know them, you'll start noticing that whatever is not uniquely portrayed in their sense of dress, externally speaking, is much more unique when it comes to what's in there. But the INFJ man will take a moment before they trust you to unveil their world to you. And it has to be admitted that part of why they will hesitate to unveil their world to you is because, through the fact that they possess FE, they do care about what you think. Don't let them tell you that they don't care, or that they're indifferent, because they're not indifferent and they're not supposed to be indifferent. It's not how they're made up. So they will be exposed to the possible criticism of their unique inner world, which is why they'll take some time to trust you to have a somewhat deep appreciation of what they can share, but also the tact to formulate feedback in a way that is not too hurtful. Another aspect where they're private about it is because it's not always easy for them to express what their inner thoughts are, because their world in there, it's not as articulated in the first place as it might be with an extroverted judger, for instance. It's a little bit more mushy, it's a little bit more symbolic, it's deeply connected to the unconscious, and therefore needs this process of translation that they're not always able to deliver. So they trust you to have the depth, to appreciate the tact, to respond in a friendly manner, but also the patience to let them expose what you think. Now, the INFJ man, in their everyday life, in the jobs they take, by and large, they would probably not be considered to be, by the somewhat superficial standards of society nowadays, they would not be considered to be the apex most successful kind of person. Of course, you're always going to have exceptions, but because they're not extroverted, because they possess, the NI dominance, often TI is quite developed as well. And also because they struggle to be in the moment. They're not the fastest paced of all people. They're not visible on social media, and they often have jobs that at first sight might appear like they're just pretty normal jobs, but you've no idea how much time they spent in their heads. And often they might not admit it to themselves, but a lot of the time the jobs they take are jobs that are partly selected because they allow them to still have, across the day and across the weeks, time to spend in their minds. So a job that is completely extroverted, that does not allow you any time to spend in your own mind, because you have obligations, whether it's the job itself, whether it's, in the office or meeting people outside, interviews. it's going to be stressful to them and deprive them of that inner world, so they will not. Usually they tend to avoid it, which is also why Jordan Peterson's not an INFJ, because he is always in that mode of being super busy all the time. Just INFJ need to retreat, not just in a room, but also sometimes by themselves in their own mind. Now, the INFJ man in love, is often a bit mysterious because it's hard to know what he expects. But often what he expects most is to have quality time with someone and, a loving, nurturing relationship with another person. They might be slow to express how they feel, and they might be a little bit formal to start with, which can be a bit off-putting. But don't forget, it's often a little bit of a defense mechanism, as they also try to figure out how they themselves feel. They're slow to fall in love, they're slow to commit, but they tend to be very, very loyal. So that was a portrait of the INFJ man. No doubt it could be a little bit more complete, but I just wanted to give you that summary. Let me know what you think in the comments, guys. See you next week.